Hey, it's Jessie David from Metal Wani, and joining me today is Jon Schaffer, Iced Earth, and the supergroup Demons and Wizards. How's it going?
It's going good. Been very busy.
I can imagine. I mean, you guys are gearing up to release your highly anticipated third studio album, 3, set to drop February 21st. Tell me about the album.
It came out really fantastic as far as we're concerned. A very, very productive year for Demons and Wizards, and the end result is great. I'm glad we were, finally able to unleash some stuff to the people on Friday last week. So the Diabolic video is out there, and the reactions have been really strong. So we're happy.
Yeah, let's talk about that opening track, Diabolic. You mentioned it was the sequel to Heaven Denies. How so?
Well, Heaven Denies wasn't really based on Paradise Lost, but people thought that it was.
Yeah.
And so basically, Hansi wrote the lyrics on that track, and when I wrote the music, when I put the musical arrangement together, my goal was to come up with an opening track, because we had a lot of awesome stuff, but I believe it was the last arrangement that I did, but I just still didn't feel like I had the right opening music yet. So I was feeling the pressure with that, and I grabbed my baritone and I started playing, and then the intro came, and everything after came pretty quick, and it just felt like the music was so dark. I just had the working title Diabolic, and when I sent it to Hansi, I said, it would be cool if you did some vocal stuff at the end of this, like we did at the end of Heaven Denies, because that's got a very haunting and spooky feel to it, and so does this. And so he liked that idea, and then we just started talking, and we're like, okay, with the working title, it certainly fits. Why don't we just go in the direction of making it kind of a sequel to Paradise, or to Heaven Denies, but actually go more in the Paradise Lost direction. So it has a little bit of Paradise Lost, and a little dash of Dante's Inferno, and some of our own creative concepts, and we knew also early on that we wanted to tie all of that into the video, like the song, the plot for the video, and the album cover and everything. Will all kind of make sense.
Now, the album, 11 new songs, 65 minutes in all. It was over a decade in the making. What were some of the setbacks you faced?
Well, it wasn't over a decade in the making, actually. I mean, we've been talking about doing it, but we didn't start. I sent him 3 songs back in 2015 or 16 that are on this album, that were songs from the Iced Earth Incorruptible songwriting period. And I just was pouring out ideas, and we honed in on what we were going to do for Iced Earth. And then I had these few extra arrangements, and I sent them to Hansi, and he sent me ideas back, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be great, but now I got to go and do the world tour, so we're going to have to put everything on pause. So that was like the only songs. There's 3 songs. It's A New Dawn, Universal Truth, and Invincible. And in fact, Invincible, the working title for that, actually was Incorruptible. So that shows you that it goes back to that Iced Earth Incorruptible period. But those 3 are from, like, let's say 2015, 16, whenever it was that I was doing songwriting for Incorruptible. And then all of the rest of this stuff I started writing in like November of 2018. And then, we had finished up master tracking of everything from, the band side, all at my studio at Independence Hall by March 15th. So it actually happened very quickly. It seems like forever, but the album has not been in works for that long. It's just the problem with Hansi and I's schedules. Our biggest challenge has always been the Iced Earth and Blind Guardian schedules, because the bands are we're bigger than ever.
Yeah.
It's global, and it's like the demands on us are that much more intense than they were when Hansi and I did our first album. It was 20 years ago, and then Crimson King was 15 years ago. But in that time, everything's grown, and it's grown to a global level. Just, I think, because of the internet, probably more than anything. And it's, when our schedules, there were so many years that we would be on the opposites. Like, I would have a slight hole, a window of opportunity in my schedule, and then Hansi would be, in the middle of the world tour, and vice versa. So for a very long time, our album cycles were not lining up right for us to have the whole to be able to devote to Demons and Wizards. But we were able to, I'd say it was like pretty early in 2018, lock down that finally the stars were going to line up and that we were going to be able to devote all of 2019 to Demons and Wizards, which is what we've done.
What I love about your music, just the stories that each song tells. I mean, your second studio album, great example, Touched by the Crimson King, is partly based on the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. So what are some of the stories or ideas around the new album?
There's a lot of different things. There's only 3 songs that are somewhat related, and that's a book series. I didn't write those lyrics. That's Hansi's thing, but I know it's about his Dark Materials is the book. I believe the title of the book. I don't know if it's a book or a series of books, but it led to that movie called The Golden Compass. And so A New Dawn, Invincible, and Universal Truth are kind of loosely related to that, from what I understand. I can speak about the songs that I wrote lyrics for, and I mean, I just told you something about Diabolic, but the ones that I wrote are Timeless Spirit, Dark Side of Her Majesty, and what was the other one? I'm completely going blank here. There's been so many through the years, but Timeless Spirit, for instance, is a direct reflection of this big hike that I went on in September and October last year. I went out into the mountains in the desert of Arizona and hiked and camped and lived under the stars for like a month, and it was fantastic. And so that trip really had a big impact on me and on the songwriting on this album. And it was a very wise move to take that month off and just get completely away from the music business and completely detached. And so that's kind of the spiritual journey, what that song's about. Dark Side of Her Majesty is an idea that I've had for quite a long time, and I never went for it. And it's a horror story about a queen that is is actually a vampire and is feeding on her subjects, and it's how she can stay alive and keep power, and may not be so far from the truth. I don't know.
I love it.
But then some of the other stuff. God, can you throw a couple titles at me? Because right off the bat, I can't really.
There's one song that kind of stood out for me because I listened to the album a few times. Fans are honestly, they're in for a treat because it's atmospheric and powerful. But the one song that stood out to me was Midas Disease, because it had a different pace. It was more kind of raw and heavier.
Yeah. That's funny you say that, because actually that is another piece of the music that goes back to the Incorruptible writing sessions. And it's, I back then I decided whenever it was called, the working title was called Unbroken, and I decided whenever it was going to be used, I was going to dedicate it to Malcolm Young from AC/DC, because it certainly has that vibe to it. And so I sent it to Hansi and I said, "Are you into this at all?" And because if you are, I'll develop it more. And he said, "Yeah, it's great." So then I added a few more sections to it and fucked around with the arrangement, and then we, and he decided to take it into a direction where it's kind of the TV evangelist thing, but it really comes down to corruption. So you can take the concept of the song and you can put it into TV evangelists or politicians or whatever. It's just about having that the greed and corruption kind of rule you, and about the very cunning personalities, how some of these people are, they're so good at selling you bullshit they never get caught, even though if they get caught somehow they still get away with it, that kind of thing. So that's where that one comes from. But that's cool. We heard a lot of discussion about that song, and we weren't really sure. We like it. That's the first and foremost, most important thing. But we just, it's so radically different of Touched by the Crimson King. So they work really well together. We work together really well. And actually, Dave is my tattoo artist.
Oh,
so
cool.
he's been doing stuff. He actually has done stuff on Iced Earth Records even as far back as as Framing Armageddon and Crucible of Man. He was involved in those albums and kind of on and off since then. So we don't have, a set pool of artists that there's a lot of different guys that we work with. Let's put it that way. But these are the two that I've been working with lately, and they did do some work on the actually Roy recolored the first album too on the reissue. So
I did notice that. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. They're fantastic. They do really great work.
Well, Demons and Wizards, lots of great tracks. Now, arguably, Fiddler on the Green is just an essential staple. Do you feel that there's kind of one track that stands up to that on the upcoming album?
They're different,
Yeah.
One of my goals with this record was to go into more of that direction as far as the classic rock thing, which Hansi and I both love, so there's elements of that, and you're going to find, and I feel like Fiddler is one of those songs that has somewhat of the classic rock feel. Sometimes on the first two Demons and Wizards records, the classic rock influence comes in an intro or an outro or maybe a bridge. In Fiddler's case, I'd say it's kind of the whole song, but on this album, we have Children of Cain and Timeless Spirit, which are definitely in the classic rock zone. And do we have something that I think that those two songs they're very epic, so they're quite a bit longer than Fiddler. But I think those are kind of in that zone. But trying to write a song that's going to live up to everybody's expectations you can't really go about it like that. You're going into a whole new chapter, all these years later. I mean, you got to realize Fiddler, we wrote that like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic song. It's definitely one of my favorites, if not my favorite. But the new album, you're talking about guys that are 20 years older now. And it would be foolish for us to try to think that we can copy or catch that. We're just catching the honest emotions that we're feeling now, and that's coming out in a very dynamic and actually super diverse record. So because I think there's like 4 different tunings on this album. There are songs where there's baritone, there's a song that's where standard tuning is, and then we have our typical E flat tuning. There's one that's in C sharp, and it's like that automatically adds a lot of diversity to the album. And then when you get into influences, there's definitely the classic rock thing. There's some alternative, some prog stuff, straight up metal stuff. It's kind of all there, but I can't say that there's a song that is like the sequel to Fiddler or that's on the same level. We've reached other levels, and I feel like there's stuff that's absolutely as strong. I think the entire album is strong, and there is no filler, which is why we ended up with such a long record, because our initial goal was like, let's just have 45 minutes, all killer, no filler. And we ended up writing all this stuff, and we just felt like all of them are strong.
It is an absolute killer album. So when you're writing the music, how do you separate what will become a Demons and Wizards song or an Ice Star song?
Well, because my focus this time around was Demons and Wizards, it was I haven't really been in a position to where I'm writing both things at the same time. You know what I mean? Typically, I'm on a specific mission when I'm writing. Like, okay, it's new Ice Earth album cycle. I'm focused on that. In this case, as I said, like 3.5 of these songs were things that were written during the Ice Earth Incorruptible writing sessions. And for whatever reason, I ended up not using them. I mean, we honed in on what we thought was working from an overall feel. Actually, a couple of the guys in my band were really bummed out because I pulled the song, which now it's called Invincible, but the working title was Incorruptible. When I pulled that off, said, no, we're not going to do that one. Then, so a couple of the guys were really bummed out about it because it was their favorite track. So I don't know. For whatever reason, I just felt like, yeah, you know what? I'll send that to Hansi. But normally I would say, like, the better way for me to answer that question is if I have a very specific vision of what the song's going to be about, whether it's the concept or an actual title, and it's speaking to me from a lyrical, and sometimes the vocal melodies come really, really fast when I'm working on an arrangement, then that's going to be a song that I will write. You know what I mean? Regardless of what project or what band it's associated with, it's going to be one that I'm going to go for and do it. Now, if I'm working on an Iced Earth album cycle and I'm coming up with a cool musical arrangement, but I don't necessarily feel where the lyrics are going to go or whatever, then that's something that I'll co-write with Stu. So, you know, that's kind of typically the way it works. When it comes down to it, the magic thing about Demons and Wizards is that it is a mix of my musical arrangements and Hansi's vocal melodies. That's what creates the monster. So I don't want to get involved in writing. I mean, I've always written lyrics here and there, and I help whenever, if he needs it, you know, and there's some albums I've written more on than others that we've done, but it's not really my job. My job is to put together let's call it the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then what he comes up with it's killer, and it just makes the thing. If I start writing all of the vocal melodies and lyrics, it will sound a lot more like Iced Earth with a new singer. That's why I don't concern myself with that stuff. So typically it's going to be the things that I really hear the vocal part, they're most assuredly going to be an Iced Earth song. And, you know, and then the ones that I don't, but I'm working in an Iced Earth album cycle, that's what I would give to, like in the past, I would hand off the musical idea to Matt, and he would listen to it and come up with lyrics and vocal parts, and then the same goes with Stu. So it just depends, you know. But I haven't really been in a situation before where I'm tasked with writing both things at the same time, so I have to say, this is better for Iced Earth, this is better for Demons. It doesn't really work that way.
2019 was a hell of a busy year for you guys as well. You wrapped up a huge tour, including festivals like Metal Days and Wacken. Would you consider releasing a live studio album?
Yeah, we will. That's most very, very likely to happen. When is a little bit up in the air. I can't imagine anything before, 2021, because next year will be, the focus is going to be on the new album. Yeah. So, but we did film Wacken and recorded it. It came out great, and we recorded a lot of the shows through the summer. We definitely have enough material together for a cool package. So we will be doing something like that in the future.
And speaking of tours, will you be going on tour in 2020 to support the album?
We actually will not. Probably going to surprise a lot of people, but we have to get back into Iced Earth and Blind Guardian zone. So we've spent the last year working on Demons and Wizards, and personally, by the time 3 comes out, that will have been 6 releases for me in 13 months. So it's been a heavy year.
Yeah.
Besides just all of the tasks that Hansi and I took on, all of the other stuff, besides that. So